So the big tax question is this: how do wealthy people keep their money working for them when selling their business, real estate, or other highly appreciated assets without paying hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars in tax? What if we, as business and real estate owners who have poured blood, sweat, and tears to growing our wealth, and who didn't hire expensive tax attorneys and CPAs to map out an exit strategy, knew their secrets? Instead of recreating the wheel, why can't we just model the way they deferred 30 to 50% in tax, paid off debt, funded their next business dream, and most importantly, leave a financial legacy to give to the causes we believe in most? What if their secrets weren't complicated at all, and you just need a guide who is a few steps ahead of you? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Brett Swarts, and welcome to Capital Gains Tax Solutions. All right, welcome to another episode of Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy, such as the Deferred Sales Trust, is the best way to grow your wealth. I'm your host, Brett Swarts. In each episode, I'm joined by some of the best financial independence and passive income wealth advisors in the world, where they share their ideas, deal stories, and inspiration, so together we can make complex tax deferral strategies simple and passive income plans achievable. Hey, as a part of selling your practice, let's say you are a veterinarian, an orthodontist, a dentist, anything that's a professional practice, you want to have a good broker who's going to help you achieve the highest price and the best terms and help you navigate the sale. Our next guest is a specialist when it comes to exactly that. You can find him at practiceexchange.com. His name is Ryan Kelly, and he is focused on the optometry brokerage, helping people who are selling their optometry businesses, practices, to get the highest price and the best terms. So Ryan, welcome to the show.
Hey, I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Brett.
So Ryan, tell us a little bit about your story and a little bit about your current focus.
All right. So I work for a company called Practice Exchange. And what we do is we help dentists and optometrists sell their practices. So we're a brokerage firm in a niche. And, I like to call us a brokerage firm when explaining it to like the greater population. But in the industry, it's kind of called practice transitions, because the beauty of a good sale of an optometry or a dental practice, it really comes down to moving it on to the next doctor. You want to have the next doctor come in and they're able to really just kind of continue on business as usual. Now, I'm looking at different brokers throughout the country, and one thing that we kind of try to differentiate ourselves with, and I like to harp on, is that our main goal is to keep practices private. So our goal is to, let's say, sell Dr. Joe Smith. He's 65 years old. He's a dentist. He's been working for 30 years. And, his goal is to sell to a doctor just like him 30 years prior. So those are the kind of relationships we like to nurture. There's a lot of private equity money coming into the industry that I'm not sure who's aware of, but like when you see these corporate dental offices, that's all private money. And they're what they do is they would buy a practice that we'd be trying to sell, and then they would kind of just implement corporate standards. And that's something that many doctors aren't too privy to, and we kind of are trying to counter that. Give it a different exit plan is kind of what we like to present.
Excellent. And so Ryan, before your success as a broker selling dental practices and optometry practices, who was Ryan growing up? I'm just curious. What were some of the gifts you were given, perhaps, that helps shape how you help others today?
Yeah. Honestly, I was looking at this question and it had me stumped. For a while, I'm like, oh, my gift growing up, I was funny. I always thought I was like a funny guy, a jokester. But then one time in college, I did a stand-up comedy act. I was elected to do a stand, and it went terribly, terribly, terribly wrong. And ever since then, I'm going with my skill is listening. I'm a big time listener, and I'm not just saying that. Like, I really do try to listen to people and learn from them every time I speak with them, and kind of gain an understanding of their perspective. Because at the end of the day, it all comes down to what you've been through, what I've been through. Our perspective shapes everything that we do, essentially. And that's why I'm pretty interested in speaking with you and learning from you. So yeah, listening would be my best skill, but growing up, I was definitely a funny guy.
No, that's great. No, hey, you need humor in any business or anything you're doing to help enjoy life. So it's a great gift to have. And of course, yeah, listening is probably the best gift to have as a broker, to make sure you really understand what your clients' needs are and how you can best serve them. But you can't best serve them until you really are a good listener. So excellent. So when did you first become fascinated and/or obsessed with helping optometrists or dentists sell their practice?
All right. So Practice Exchange is, to be honest, it's a family operation. So I was in school and my dad was hinting at me whether or not it's something I'd like to get into. And then I ended up going to grad school. And when I was getting my MBA, I decided that I was gonna go all in on this family business. And obviously at first I was just keen to the idea of growing a business, like many entrepreneurs would be. But then once I really started talking to doctors on a daily basis and realizing that, they have like they have a fantastic profession. They're helping people on a daily basis. And then they create these assets that are very lucrative. But something that not many people understand is these lucrative assets, they're very volatile. So let's say you have a practice right now and it's at its peak. It's doing like $2 million in gross revenues. Okay. The practice evaluation and what that practice is quote unquote worth is based on the last 3 years of business. So let's say 5, 10 years from now, the practice is only doing $750,000. The doctors suffer a huge, huge loss. And to go even further off that point, it's sad the amount of doctors who are unaware of this. And at one point, their practices were thriving, but then when they go to sell, 10 years later, their practice is so small that it essentially is dying. And we're unable to help them because banks aren't looking to get involved. And the banks are the only way that buyers are able to purchase the practices. So that when I found out how many doctors who ended up at the tail end of their career sitting on a dying asset, it was something that kind of gave me a little bit of like a rejuvenation, I would say, to really go out there and meet as many people as possible and help as many people.
Absolutely. This is something they pour their heart, soul, and blood, sweat, and tears into, and to only see it not be able to either serve their retirement or not as much of their needs would really be painful. And so what you're saying is, hey, you're going to come in there and you're going to help them show them these numbers, show them how to perhaps sell at optimal timing to capture the maximum value based upon the previous 3 years of operations, and really just show them, hey, this might be the best time to sell, or let's create a plan to help you get 3 years trailing so that we can indeed achieve a higher sales price. Is that a fair summary?
That's a fantastic summary. That's spot on.
Excellent. And so maybe give us a deal story or two, about what you do or how your service has helped somebody in that exact scenario. Walk us through or just a typical sale when you're representing a dentist or an optometrist.
Okay, so a typical sale is a doctor will approach us and kind of be interested in getting a valuation done, and that's completely typical. I mean, completely normal. We do free preliminary evaluations. So what we would do is we'd take the last 3 years of tax returns, and based off the last 3 years of tax returns, we were able to kind of come up with a price point. And I don't mean to just act like it's no big deal. Let's say 2018, 2017, 2016, you look at those 3 years of tax returns. And again, as I was harping on before, how it's a volatile price, 2018 would be weighted 3 times. 2017 would only be weighted twice, then 2016 once. So that's just for our listeners, any dentists or optometrists out there who have a practice, just so you have an understanding of how important the last year of business is. That's how the valuations are done. So then
let's pause there, Ryan, because I get the sense that perhaps some dentists, just in that scenario you just told me, that it's in the last 3 years, the previous year is going to be 3 times the amount. the 2 years prior is going to be 2 times, and then 3 years prior is going to be 1 time the amount. And so, but I get the sense that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that dentists, if they're thriving and doing amazing, they're not necessarily thinking about selling right now. It perhaps, maybe it could be, but maybe oftentimes it's when things are declining and maybe they're not enjoying as much, and that's when the business suffers. So walk us through just that tension there of when to sell, if to sell, when it's thriving, when it's not thriving. Walk us through some of those discussions that you might have with a dentist or an optometrist.
Yes, that's a fantastic point. The thing is, not very many people are thinking about an exit plan when they're making more money than they have in their entire life. So I was talking to a dentist the other day. They're grossing $2 million. They're walking home with $800,000 a year. It's pretty hard for someone like myself to be like, you really might want to sell. They looking at me like I have 3 heads, but it's all about a long-term exit strategy. So if they were thinking 5 years down the line, then they can plan accordingly. It kind of comes down to whether or not you're willing to work for somebody else, because we can structure deals, and anyone can structure a deal where the dentist sells next year, they work for the next 3 years, X amount of days a week, and they can kind of go off on their own terms and not have to deal with that day-to-day, to be in charge of managing the day-to-day operations. But to go off of what you're saying, it is very difficult to convince somebody that their asset that is giving them such an exorbitant amount of wealth is actually volatile, to the point that one day, if they don't plan properly, they could be in an unfortunate situation.
Excellent. Yeah, great answer. So willing to work for somebody else is what it kind of comes down to. And then they can maybe maximize the value if they were to sell when things are going really well. If they're willing to, I guess, give up some of that control, which probably is the tension again, I imagine, which means you'd have to find the right ideal corporate partner or buying group that has your values. So walk us through how a dentist or optometrist might vet or select those, and or what relationships do you have to bring those groups in to try to make it a really ideal match?
Okay. To answer that question, I think you first have to differentiate between practices. For both dental and optometry, you're going to have, let's say, A-level practices. These A-level practices, they have a pool of buyers like you and I, individuals looking to buy. Then they also have corporate money coming in and looking to buy. So the selling doctor has to make their own decision whether or not they're okay with selling to a corporate entity. Because once you sell to a corporate entity, they take over everything. So they tell you production standards. They can get rid of your staff. They can make you take different insurances, and all of that changes the day-to-day operation of your practice. Or you decide that, I only want to sell to another sole proprietor, another doctor like myself. And then that's when you kind of get opened up to a whole pool of buyers, and a company like ours would present multiple different people to you, and just wait for that cultural fit and fit in terms of the price point, and everything comes together that way. But to make it crystal clear, these A-level practices have, let's say, twice as many people looking to buy them as a practice that's more of a B level, just because banks are more willing to fund these practices, and they're more lucrative, of course, but they're also a little bit less risky, because they have when you have such a large gross revenue, there's money there to be had, to be made.
Excellent. And I'm curious, for the corporate ones, that are they 3 full-time dentists or optometrists or more per practice location? Well, how are they determining? Is there a certain revenue number where the corporate will look at it, or walk us through what are some of the defining boundaries for private versus corporate?
Okay, all right, yeah, that's a great question. Great question. So the revenues that are kind of like the defining numbers is like kind of like $1 million. Once you're grossing over $1 million, you're open at all. A bunch of doors are opened. In the dental world, you see practices grossing 2, 3, 4 million. Optometry, the top of the line optometry probably around 1.8, 2 million. But when you're looking at those practices, those are the practices that corporate money are willing to pay premiums on. I'm not going to lie to you, Brett. these corporate entities, they pay more than we're able to get doctors in our traditional brokerage sense, because they're sitting on a pot of money, and it's being funded because these I don't mean to call them investments, because at the end of the day it's all about patient care, but these investments really are their gold mines. So but to answer your question, no, they don't necessarily have to have three doctors. It's usually an operation that's doing upwards of $1 million, so it's very difficult for one dentist to produce much more than 1.5. A really elite dentist maybe doing 1.5, but a lot of the times you'll see they would buy the practice, have that dentist stay on, and then they would bring in an associate, and they would slowly turn a one doctor operation into two doctors, because the highly skilled doctor is the one that is leaving. And oftentimes the doctors are younger, out of school, paying off student debt, doing their thing, the doctors who are working for these corporate entities.
Excellent. Great answer. It's really helpful. So now let's shift a little bit. Would you give us an example of how your service kind of helps create and preserve more wealth for a particular doctor, whether it be through deferring capital gains tax, or what are some strategies you've seen for doctors that are selling, and what have they done to defer the 30 to 50% of capital gains tax?
Yeah, see, this is a thing that I've been really looking forward to speaking with you about. So when we sell a practice, all right, 85 to 90% of that is allocated to Goodwill. Okay, so that's only taxed at 15%. And then what we do with the other 10 to 15%, they're allocated to quote unquote hard assets, and they're taxed at 35% up to the depreciated amount. So for optometry's sake, just because they have an Optos, it's in a piece of equipment that put me on the spot. I put myself on the spot here trying to define what an Optos does, and I can't even remember what an Optos does. But an Optos is a piece of equipment that optometrists buy, and they use it on a daily basis. So let's say you bought it for $100,000. It's depreciated to $50,000. Up until $50,000, it'll be taxed at 30 to 35%. 35%, and then after that, it'd be taxed at the capital gain rate.
Got it. Okay, so it just depends if it's hard asset or Goodwill, but most of them are structuring as 85% Goodwill and then 50% hard assets. And then based upon the basis of those hard assets, depending on how much depreciation you've taken, will be hit with 35%, but the other amount of Goodwill would be at a lower tax rate. Is that a fair summary?
That's a spot on summary. I'm not, and again, this is where I harp on. We have such a great team at Practice Exchange. I'm not the CPA over there. You get put into contact with the CPA, and they're the ones who help you in creating your purchase and sales agreement. But from what I understand is, that's one of the main things we offer is 85 to 90% in Goodwill, and it saves the doctors a ton. And the other thing we like to offer to preserve wealth, or not offer, but advise, is sometimes if the doctor is selling and they're hanging up their coat after, it might be advisable to sell like January 1. It's on a new year, so their huge salary isn't going to be brought into effect on what they get taxed on for the net sale price.
Excellent. Yeah. So staggering it into the following year so that they're making whatever they're bringing in that given year, they've already retired or walked away. So their income is going to go, let's say, to zero or very low, and then bringing in the rest in so that you're in a lower overall tax bracket. So that's what you're saying?
Yeah. And Brett, I wrote down a couple of numbers.
Yeah. Why don't you share that with us? Share the listeners. What give us kind of a breakdown? That'd be great.
So a dental practice that we sold, it had a selling price of $980,000. Okay. We allocated $780,000 to Goodwill. So that was taxed at 15%. And that's fantastic if you're a selling doctor. So then 200,000 were allocated to furnishings, equipment, and fixtures. Then 15,000 was allocated to inventory. And the reason I just want to point this out, the difference between dental and optometry is dentists don't really have a ton of inventory. Optometrists, they have all the frames, contact lenses, and at the end of the day, it's a lot more of their inventory. So for the dental, it was $980K selling price, $780 $80K Goodwill, $200K furnitures and fixtures. For the optometry, it was a $1 million selling price, $726,000 allocated to Goodwill. Inventory and supplies, $42,000. Then equipment, furniture, fixtures, $232K. That's just for any listener out there who's trying to do this on their own. You could try to look at that and figure it out on your own. But the real word of advice is you have to get a CPA who specializes in practice transitions, and ideally a lawyer who specializes in practice transitions.
And that's what you guys provide, right, Ryan? You're the broker, but you also have the in-house or CPA, and the attorneys are all the contacts for that?
Yeah, we have the contacts. We can't provide the lawyer because of privileges and things like that. But we have the CPA. We have CPAs. But you don't want your own lawyer. But we can. We have contacts of lawyers throughout the country who strictly do this.
Excellent. So, what should every wealth advisor? This is financial advisor, commercial real estate broker, business broker. Everyone who's kind of in the industry, a lender. What should they know about what you do? And for the ones that work with you, how do they best leverage your service and expertise to help grow their business?
Yeah, it's the main point that I've been kind of hammering home. It's practice evaluations are done based on 3 years. I just like to hammer that home because so many people do not know that. I talked to a dentist the other day. He's like, "Oh, but 5 years ago I was doing this. If a new doctor just does this and this, they can make this." And I'm sitting there on the other side of the phone, like, I hear you 100%. I believe you, but a bank does not really care what you have to say right now. They don't finance potential. That's one thing that I've learned over the years is that banks do not finance potential. In terms of like how to leverage our services, with the brokerage industry, it kind of comes down to who you want to work with. I'm sure that you've learned the same thing over the years. It's really about a relationship that you build with somebody, and just make sure you're comfortable with the person you're working with, as I guess would be how I answer that question.
Yeah, it's a great answers. Those are awesome. What are some of the questions that you're going to ask? I guess more so for that seller to make sure he's realistic about your answer that you just gave about 5 years ago I was doing this, but now I'm doing this. Why can't I get this price? I imagine a lot of dentists think the practices are worth more until they actually understand the 3-year rule. So what are some of the questions that you're asking to kind of determine motivation for those owners when you're considering taking a listing on?
Yeah, so we want to know a time frame. All right, we want to know a time frame. We ask the time frame and objective. Is your objective to sell the practice, wash your hands, and go to Hawaii? Is your objective to sell the practice, work 2 days a week, sell the practice, work 3 days a week? And then, if it's a really good practice, we are able to sometimes do it and sell it, and the doctor can work 3 or 4 days a week. But you have to have a practice that is cash flowing, man, to be able to do that. Let me just look at here. The other thing that we like to advise, and I know you were talking about on the seller side, but I'm actually going to spin it onto the buyer side. We advise to buy the real estate if you can. You want to own the building because, let me explain it. If for 20 years from now, 20 years, you're going to be working at that. You're going to be working there every single day. You're going to be paying rent for 20 years. Ideally, you're going to be paying off the real estate so that when you go to sell in 20 years from now, it's like a double whammy. You get to sell the practice when it's at its peak, and you get to sell the real estate that practice is paid for. You paid for it, but you were just going to work every day paying for your practice. The other thing is constant education for these buyers. The dentists who are making the most money, they're the most skilled dentists. They're the dentists who aren't referring out root canals, who are doing all the procedures in-house. And that just comes down to constant and continual education. And that's something that I kind of try to do on my own. So Excellent. It's definitely, in terms of what people should do, those would be my words of advice.
Those are great words of advice. Very helpful, very practical. And so, how do you stay centered on your values? Just kind of more personal here. Get the listeners a chance to get to know you a little bit more, Ryan. How do you stay centered in your values and encouraged to drive to new heights and reach your goals?
Yeah. Again, this was another question that I was just thinking about how I was going to answer it. I'm just like everybody else. I think I have my up and my down days. It's just I think that it's all about who you surround yourself with and your environment. Uh, Again, we have such a good team over at Practice Exchange. Everyone brings something different, but on a daily basis, I'm realistic. You can't be at the same thing every single day, and I think that it's important for people to realize that everyone's going through something. So, I just try to do the right thing every day, and I feel like that's all we can. That's all we really can do.
I love it. No, great answer. So let's go for the lightning round. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right.
I'm
So
ready.
your favorite leadership or business book or wealth building book?
Oh, favorite business leadership book. Honestly, it's just my favorite book in general. It's written by Mark Manson. It's a subtle art of not giving a F word. I don't want to swear here, but that's my favorite book I ever read in my life. And it's all about values and things, kind of the last question we were just speaking about. It might not be as business oriented as people were hoping for, but that's a must read, and I do not care what anyone says.
Excellent. Mark Manson, the subtle art of and the explicit. Okay, great. Excellent.
Yeah.
What is your favorite encouraging or leadership or business podcast that you listen to?
I used to be listening to a lot of the Gary V. Then I started to, Andy Frisella. I don't know if you know Andy Frisella, but I've been listening to a lot of his podcasts. I think that one's really good. Uh, I honestly just listen to a lot of different podcasts. I've been listening to a lot of history podcasts lately because I feel like you can learn a lot from like evaluating leadership from like historians. And so Ben Franklin's World, that's another one people might want to check out.
Sounds great. And Ryan, where are you located again for our listeners?
So we're located in Providence, Rhode Island, but we operate all over the country. A lot of what we do marketing wise is on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and actually a lot on LinkedIn. So yeah, we implement our business model throughout the entire country. We built a database of every optometrist in the country, and we're working on doing that for dental as well. So yeah, anyone anywhere in the country who's considering a practice transition or just wants a word of advice, please give us a call. Practice Exchange.
That's great. So everyone, once again, you can find Ryan at practiceexchange.com and you can email him directly at ryan@practiceexchange.com. Hey, Ryan, I want to thank you for being on the show and sharing your wisdom and your practical advice for helping dentists and optometrists who are considering selling their practice. Hey, if you reach out to Ryan and hire him to be your broker and to advise you and help you with your transition. I also want to thank our listeners again for listening to another episode of Capital Gains Tax Solutions Podcast. As always, we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy, such as the Deferred Sales Trust, is the best strategy and best way to grow your wealth. Until next time, we look forward to connecting with you on the next podcast, and go make it a great day. Thanks so much.
You have just listened to another information-packed episode of Capital Gains Tax Solutions with Brett Swarts. We hope you enjoyed today's show and found it helpful. Visit capitalgainstaxsolutions.com to access the show notes and to access more resources. Don't forget to leave a review and join us again next time.